In today's lesson, we are going to look at some budgeting key terms. So this is just to help us become more familiar with some of the key terms that we may come across when we look at the lessons in our personal finance unit. So we are going to be looking at these different terms, right? So we're going to want to match these terms with the specific definitions. So I'll read out a definition. We'll pause for a second to let you kind of guess which term you think it matches. So again, you can take a picture of this, or you can just kind of sit back and just kind of listen through. But we're going to be trying to learn about what net earnings, fixed expenses, utilities, lease, studio apartment, variable expenses, landlord, tenant, property taxes, condo, common fees, and budget refer to. So the first term, taxes charged to property owners by municipalities to pay for a number of local services, including education, police, fire department, public libraries, and snow removal. The amount of tax is based on the estimated value of the property. So what term do you think this would go to? If you guessed property taxes, you are correct. So property taxes are something you would have to pay if you own a house or an apartment or a condo, whatever the situation is. If you own land or you own a property, you do have to pay property taxes on it, which again helps to cover those different services in the community that you live in. The next term, expenses shared by all owners of a condominium complex, which may include snow plowing, grass cutting, cable TV, building maintenance, and areas such as pool and fitness areas. This one may be kind of more of a common sense, but this is common fees, or you may hear it as condo fees. So depending on the living arrangements, if you do live in a condo, chances are there may be common or condo fees. You may even come across this sometimes in apartments. Essentially, it is fees to cover some of the services that the condo building or the apartment provide. Right? So depending on the situation, there's usually a parking lot, so you may have to pay for snow removal, general repairs to the building itself, such as the roof or windows, or general landscaping. Or if there's if it's a larger condo complex, maybe there's a shared pool, or a gym or a fitness area. So again, depending on what the condo building is like, there may be different fees associated with it. Depending sometimes on where you live as well. If you live in a subdivision or in a townhouse subdivision, there may be some sort of condo fees or subdivision fees that kind of, again, provide the same or help to pay for some of those same services. So something you want to be aware of, because it is an additional fee that usually isn't included. It's additional to other fees that you may have to pay. An organized income and spending plan is said to be balanced when the money coming in equals the money going out, which includes money going into savings and investing. So this would be a budget. So a good plan when you are dealing with money is to work on coming up with a budget. You want to come up with a budget so that you can kind of account for all of the money that you have and basically just be responsible with it, right? You don't want to spend more than you have, and you also you want to be able to save up, right? We talked about the what you can save, or how you can save money, or how you can grow your money with investing. So again, things to be mindful of. But budgeting is basically just kind of planning all of that. A small apartment with an open space that serves as a living room and a bedroom. So this would be a studio apartment. So you may see images of this online, but essentially it's kind of where it's like one large room that contains the bedroom, the living room, the kitchen, everything like that. So um, they were used to be called bachelor pads or bachelor apartments, things like that. But a studio apartment tends to be more of the common term now. Um, so again, it's more of just like kind of one large room. So you may see this. You might see pictures of it in Toronto and large cities where space is a luxury in a sense. So a lot of people live in these kind of one room apartments or studio apartments. Regularly occurring expenses that are the same from one time period to the next. These expenses are generally unlikely to change over a time frame of a year. So, example, monthly rent or car insurance. So, this would be an example of a fixed expense. Right? So, an expense is something that you have to pay, and fixed just basically means it's not changing. Right? So, you could look at cell phone bills generally now that you don't have to pay for text messaging or usually it's like a unlimited calling. Usually those are fixed unless you don't have unlimited data. Maybe cable generally tends to be fixed. Internet tends to be fixed. Again, there may be situations where you go over or use more than you have, so you get charged extra. But insurance, rent, those also tend to be fixed expenses. They don't tend to change month to month. One of the units in a housing complex which is collectively owned by the residents. So that would be an example of a condo. We talked about common fees before. Those are associated with a condo and condo buildings. So a condo is one of the individual kind of buildings that people uh, purchase or rent and live in. And generally, it's usually smaller than apartments. Not necessarily always, but again, just a different type of living arrangement. Services such as water, electricity, and heating, or gas. So these services are considered utilities. So if you're renting, you may find that utilities may or may not be included. In some cases, you may also, um, if you're living on your own, you do have to pay for your utilities anyways. But the big one would be renting. They tend to um, sometimes include some of the utilities if it's a shared building or a shared apartment, or maybe the apartment is in the bottom of a house and the landlords or the owners live above. They may say, okay, the utilities are included because we're living here as well. But utilities are an expense that you do have to consider when living on your own. Total earnings less or minus all payroll deductions, commonly called take home pay. So this would be an example of net earnings. So your net earnings are essentially or is essentially what you take home. What do you um, what do you take home after all the deductions are made to your paycheck? Right. So we'll touch on this in a future lesson. But when you take a look at your hourly rate or your paycheck, usually there are deductions involved. And then whatever you get to take home is considered your net earnings. A written agreement that outlines the conditions and terms of a property rental. So this is the lease. So usually when you rent an apartment or a condo or a house, you sign a lease. So again, these are all the terms and conditions that you agree to, what you agree to pay, when you agree to pay it, how you or what condition you agree to keep the home in. It may also be the restrictions on what you're allowed to do with the home. Right? Are you allowed to um, make renovations? Are you allowed to I don't know add in utilities, how many people you are allowed to live there. Pets, sometimes they may make restrictions on pets, even though I believe that they are not allowed to. In some cases, they may. If it's a private rental, they may be allowed to put in those kind of stipulations or conditions into the lease. A person or an organization that owns and rents properties to others. This would be a landlord or property owner, or sometimes maybe it's like a condo association, um, or like a condo management group, where they kind of oversee the properties, and the conditions that they're in, and kind of take care of all the small bits, whatever the case may be. Expenses that may change in frequency and or amount from one time period to the next. So, for example, food, electricity, gifts, things like that. You may also consider water to be one of these examples, and this would be an example of variable expenses. So these are things that can change from time to time, um, or like we said, from one period to another. So they're not fixed. They're not kind of the same thing um, overall. Someone who rents accommodations. So if someone who rents is commonly referred to as a tenant. So this is anytime you're reading um, the lease agreements, or any contracts, if it refers to a tenant, then that's going to be referring to you or the person who is renting the accommodation. So again, those are all kind of some of the key terms that we are going to be focusing on, at least in this lesson. There may be other ones that we come up with. This should give us a good introduction into the world of personal finance, and some of the key terms that you may have to associate with renting an apartment, or purchasing, or home ownership. So again, the main thing is just kind of just being familiar with these terms and understanding what they mean. So when we do see them, we're not completely out of touch or lost.